Now we have everything going. Yes. So today we're going to continue from last time, which is my notes from Rabbi Effie Ehrenberg on chapters 26, 27, and 28 of Tanya. Very deep chapters. Okay, so we're going to review like the last page that we finished up last time. So everybody's problem is feeling our ego as the center of the universe. It's good that we can relate to each other because we have a similar, it's not like I'm the only one. It's something, it's just how that's the avoda of a Beinoni. Okay, and then he asked this cute question: how intricate does your self-justification become? How many ways can I prove that it's not my fault, not my responsibility? Somebody, they made me do it. They made me do it. Yes. So however it goes, so to take responsibility rather than to have intricate self-justification, it seems the easiest thing is to take responsibility, not wiggle out of it. He said, if we say I was wrong, but it's an attempt to wiggle out of it. Okay, so let's see. Then he brought up an interesting idea here. People feel that their physical issues have a legitimacy. Like if I have a boo-boo, and sometimes we can have big boo-boos, we can blame our physical issues on whatever, my bad mood, my whatever, it depends on what we might want to be looking for something to blame. So if someone could be shown that they're trace them back to psychological issues, people don't feel they have so much legitimacy. It's like, don't tell me it's a psychological issue. I'm quite sure it's a physical issue, and therefore nothing is my fault. So physical issues can be a way. Okay. So people with physical issues can use it to explain their mood swings, etc. And the more they're seen as psychological, the less they're seen as, they're less legitimate. Okay, so it's just something to keep in mind. People cling to physical problems as a source of legitimacy. We take a lot of existential legitimacy from my physical issues, just in ourselves as we're doing that self-scrutiny. It's just another little alley we could study. Okay. So he repeats this again. People cling to their physical issues because today it's a strong source of legitimacy. It can be an asset. Well, it can be an asset getting one of those handicapped parking passes. That can be a big asset in life, let alone, okay. So in therapy, and this can be, just our being therapists for our best friends. In therapy, we generally start with Havdala. Why? Because the presumption is the person came for help. That means the person is already experiencing some hachna'ah. So the hachna'ah is like making my ego smaller in the sense that I see I have a problem that I need to discuss with somebody else. So that's hachna'ah. I don't have all the answers. I'm making my ego smaller. So the actual therapy begins with Havdala, which is separating from the problem and observing it. Observing the problem. We spoke about the idea of observing one's thoughts, observing one's feelings. And I was so happy that this week, I had an attack of, I don't know what to call it, lowered feelings, bummed out. And it's easy to try to find a reason. It's easy to try to, there's many things to be depressed about. If we just focus on everyone has a lot of things. It's not the Geula Shalema. There's a lot of things to be depressed about. So this idea that, and we want, so the idea is we understand, we've mentioned many times, essential Baal Shem Tov is that the circumstances of our life, down to the smallest detail, come from Hashem. Like it's okay, it's Hashem giving us what our soul needs. Sometimes we don't understand, why did we have to have all those childhood traumatic experiences? But somehow this is what our soul needs. Sometimes it's just because we'll learn how to turn the darkness into light. And that can give us a lot of mileage and a lot of motivation. All that darkness, I'm such a lucky girl to turn it into light. Yes. So, so the cannot be taken in by the circumstances. People need clarity. We all need clarity in dealing with the circumstances of our life. But to understand that the circumstances themselves are good. Not only they're good, they're the best. So this is like a fundamental idea in Hasidus and Torah Hanefesh. A Rebbe with Ruach HaKodesh can tell what the real issue is. So when we say not to buy into it, we're not saying the circumstances aren't real. Like when someone is explaining the circumstances of their life, they are real. People don't lie about the circumstances. It's very rare. The circumstances are real, but the problem is a lack of clarity in dealing with the circumstances. So not to buy into the delusion that the circumstances are bad, because it's saying Hashem is bad. And we have to, that's something we all have to look at. How much do I believe Hashem is good? It's something that we have to work on. It's part of our avodas Hashem, believing that Hashem is good and and since Hashem produces the circumstances down to a blade of grass blowing in the wind, then the circumstances are good. We need clarity in dealing with the circumstances. Okay. Of course, for other people, we have to have the courage to empathize with their suffering, to be there for them. The suffering definitely can get empathy, but the circumstances are from Hashem. We can't lose track of that. Okay. So a person needs to subjugate his ego to express Hashem. If we want, that's the hachna'ah. It's hard to at least for me, it's hard to translate hachna'ah into English. Sometimes it's translated as submission. Sometimes I think of it as just making it smaller, making the anxiety smaller, making the problem smaller. So a person needs to subjugate his ego if we want to be conduits for Hashem. And this is an idea we spoke about, that the Baal Shem Tov taught that we have to learn something from everything. So what can we learn that it's such a big deal to scientists that they say that the sun is the center of the universe? Now we figured it out, not the earth, the center of the solar system. I mean, everything is rotating. It's really nothing is really standing still. It's hard to say what the center is, but what can we learn from this? And we can learn from this as a time that we can take the ego out of the center and put Hashem in the center. And this is Iskafia. Anytime we put the ego aside and Hashem is in the center. Okay, so, or chip off the klipas to expose the light. I was thinking of that also. Like we want the light, the light, when the light of someone's soul is shining forth, the person, it's like everyone looks beautiful, save on plastic surgery and Botox. Just let that inner light of the soul shine through. So sometimes the klipas have to be chipped away. It's a lifetime job, chipping away those klipas, because we spontaneously identify with our animal soul. In other words, to get the divine soul's opinion, we have to hold up the microphone, divine soul. What's your opinion? We want to bring it out more. We want it to have more of an influence on our life. And the revelation of Hashem comes from the ego stepping aside, moving aside. So in the combat between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, so since the animal soul is kind of linked there with the Yetzer Hara, for Hashem to win, we lose. The ego loses, the Yetzer Hara loses, Hashem wins. Yay, my taivas lose, Hashem wins. It's an interesting idea. Especially if we're rooting for Hashem, then it's very cool. Okay, so to make shalom bayis, Rabbi Effie does some psychological counseling. How do you make shalom bayis? First, you meet with the husband and explain to him how everything is his fault. Then you meet with the wife and explain to her how everything is her fault. And that's called shalom bayis. Isn't that great? Everyone has to take 100% responsibility, and then you can have shalom. Everyone has to feel responsible. And it's true, it's the only way to have shalom bayis. 50-50 doesn't work, only 100% to 100%. And often Hiskafia is not identifying with my initial view on something. Like maybe my initial view is wrong. I'm putting my initial view aside. That's also Hiskafia. Coming to a person and saying, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. It sweetens the situation. Someone might feel they're on the losing side, but the situation is sweetened. It's win-win. So this idea that we spoke about, so in chapter 1, the Alter Rebbe brings a quote from the Medrash of Eov saying, Barata Rishoim, Barata Tzadikim. We say to Hashem, you created Rishoim, you created Tzadikim. So what does it mean? Where does our free choice fit in? So these Rishoim are Beinanim like us, but any thought, it says even, it says in the very first paragraph of Tanya, even if all your best friends say that you're a tzaddik, a tzaddikus, consider yourself Russia, like a Russia. How are we like a Russia? Any thought can arise in our mind. The Alter Rebbe says in chapter 27, don't be shocked. We shouldn't be shocked. I'm not sure if I told in our group here, this I learned from Y.Y. Jacobson. Why can't a Kohen Gadol marry a widow? What did a widow do wrong? Why can't a Kohen Gadol marry a widow? So the reason that's given is that the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh Kadoshim on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, the holiest place. And if he saw some attractive married woman, he could wish her husband should drop dead so he could marry her. So the Torah says, no, don't forget, it won't do you any good because you can't marry a widow. So the Torah takes into account the Kohen Gadol in the holiest place and the holiest day of the year could have any thought. We can't be shocked at the initial thought that arises in our mind. It's like, it's just part of the human condition. The idea isn't to be shocked, but to say, now I can do one of the 6 constant mitzvahs and push it out of my mind. And we spoke about if we can't yasiach das with a samach to push it out of our mind, yasiach with a sin, which means to talk to about it, to a mentor, to a friend, a trustworthy friend. But we're not allowed to drive ourselves crazy with our thoughts. Okay, so so if we're a Beinani, our avodas Hashem is this hachna'ah, making the ego smaller. I mean, we spoke about it. The Alter Rebbe devotes the whole chapter 30 in Tanya about feeling humble, mamish, really before the lowest of the low. Like it's because it's very safe. We don't need any band-aids. The ego doesn't have far to fall. It's a very safe balance, and it's true, really. I mean, everyone has their challenges. We're not putting in the effort that the lowest of the low would have to put in to change. So how can we possibly feel better than that person? And this is a very stable position to be in. Hashem wins. When we do Hachna, Hashem wins. And for Hashem to win, it seems like the ego might have to lose. So the Rosh Shel Beinani, we spoke about the 3 levels of Beinani. There's the Tzaddik Shel Beinani, the Beinani while davening. So we can have moments of dveikus, moments of feeling one with Hashem. The middle level Beinani, the Beinani who's learning, realizes that everything is Hashgacha Pratis, and Hamoach Shalit al Halev, that the mind can rule the heart. And the lowest level of Beinani, the Rosh Shel Beinani, realizes we are on thin ice. It's so easy to fall if we're not aware. If we're not aware, we could spew, we could get, with all the things that can happen. All right, but the Beinani has to think before being impulsive. That's one of the big perks of being a tzaddik. A tzaddik can just be spontaneous. A Russia is spontaneous. And the Beinoni gets a whole book to encourage us that we might have to look at our behavior before. It's a big deal, a whole lifetime of that. And to be cheerful, to be besimcha at the same time. Okay, so the Beinoni we can step out of ourselves and identify with Hashem's cause. I thought that was an interesting sentence. I can step out of myself and identify with Hashem's cause. Like it's not about me right now, it's about Hashem. What does Hashem want me to do in this situation? Isn't that an interesting idea? To identify with Hashem's cause. It's interesting, the two things that appeared first in my mind, recent things about people identifying with Hashem's cause, is there was a parade last week in Yerushalayim. That's not such a holy parade. And I have a friend that has a carpentry store right on Melech George, the street that the parade goes by on. And he has a big glass window to his carpentry shop. So you see through the window the parade, but in the shop, there's people putting on tefillin. The men were invited in, and they're enthusiastically, and it's to give a Jew a chance to do a mitzvah, to give a Jew a chance to do a mitzvah, another Jew a chance to do a mitzvah. Very inspiring, no judgment. What an opportunity. To see it as an opportunity. This Jew might not have had this opportunity. Give them a chance. Also, one of Rev Yitzhak's students, Ariel Grona, spoke about how when all these left-wing demonstrations that we might not so much identify with their cause in Tel Aviv, and they go out and speak to the people because the people demonstrating, protesting, they want to speak, and to think, what a wonderful opportunity that I could speak to this person, otherwise I wouldn't have a chance, and now they're demonstrating in the street, I could speak to them. And I find that so inspiring to want to just identify with Hashem's cause, help another Jew do a mitzvah. Okay. So when I'm self-involved, self-absorbed, that the ego is really, the ego can do that for hours. My avodas Hashem, my service of Hashem is losing. Okay. So the rectification, as I spoke about many times, the first year class in Torah is called Rectifying the Ego, and everyone wants to send their relatives to rectifying the ego. It's so rectifying the ego, sometimes I need to initiate the loss. Let Hashem win. I'm going to let Hashem win this time. Okay. And to be able to, so he gives this example again of saying, I'm sorry. Although I can strongly identify with my cause, I can say I'm sorry, and it can bring a sweetening. It can bring a sweetening to the situation. Everything becomes sweetened. So Barasa Rashoyim, you created Rashoyim to be evil without actually being evil, to have the same thought as a Russia, but I'm not going to follow that thought. So, how does Iyov say this, quoted in chapter 1, that Hashem created evil people? There's free will. So to have the same thoughts without actually following the thoughts. I mean, that's where we get the whole Tanya, this is the avoda of the Beinoni. And you would think, now, Baruch Hashem, this is my Yovel year of being from Shabbos Hagadol. I was from 49 years. Yovel year, you would think, come on already. Shouldn't my thoughts kind of clear up? But this is the avoda. This is the voda of the Beinoni. And we can and again, when the ego is lower, that space becomes filled with Hashem's presence and simcha and joy. Because people think, by, shiftless, lowered ego, maybe I'm feeling depressed. No, it's the opposite. It's a feeling of joy, not having to uphold the ego. It's so tiring to prove how I'm right and how I'm justified, etc. So we can always be the Rosh Hashanah Beinoni. This is the guy that's, when we're on thin ice, it's so short, though, it's so easy to fall through the thin, it's so easy. Follow the thought, have a second thought. It's so tempting. My animal soul really wants to follow the thought. It feels I've had a hard day as your animal soul. Let me follow these thoughts. Come on, come on. So to not do it, Hashem wins. The animal soul loses. Okay. So I wanted to share with our group here, our lovely group here, some memories about Emet. Emet stands for Emotional Maturity Through Torah. In the late 1970s, Miriam Adahan, a teacher in Yerushalayim, was taking a secular system called mental health through will training and turning it into a very Toradic system. So I want to go back and speak a little bit about this mental health through will training. So it was actually it was started by a Jewish psychiatrist in the 1930s in Chicago, Avraham Lowe. And it was a very will training, mental health through will training, how not to drive ourselves crazy. And the companion, that was one volume, was called Mental Health Through Will Training. And the second, there's only 2 volumes. The second volume was entitled Lectures to Relatives of Former Patients, like how not to drive your relatives back into the loony bin after they've, Baruch Hashem, been released. I shouldn't laugh. Okay, so let's go slowly. So how the method worked. And we would go, and while Miriam was writing the book, like a group of my friends from Crown Heights, we would go, and it would be with 3 or 4 of us, and it's a very humbling experience with people who recently got out of mental hospitals. And how it worked was this idea of giving an example. The example is actually, here's how the example works. It's a few steps. The first step is to describe in about two minutes, this and this happened, and I began to work myself up. Doesn't that sound like fun? One can scout out during the week when this and this happens, and I began to work myself up. Then there is, what are my physical feelings? What are my sensations? This is really Havdala. This, I guess the Hachna'ah is saying I began to work myself up. I'm not even saying that someone forced me to work myself up. I began to work myself up. So that's the Hachna'ah, making the ego smaller. And the Havdala is, what are my physical symptoms? What are my thoughts? So again, the Havdala on the thoughts, you could see how valuable that could be. Because we need it all the time. As I said earlier this week, there was a period I had like these lowered feelings, and there was an option of filling it up with, everyone has lots of reasons to be depressed. If that was the assignment, you have 2 minutes to make yourself miserable, concentrate hard. So we could do it, yay team. So this is taking the opposite approach. So it's describing what happened. I could work myself up, I could become depressed, whatever it is. This is the situation, and these were the feelings. So what are my physical sensations? What are my racing thoughts? And then there was called the waking up process. So the waking up process that breaks into this with these kind of very short sayings that are easy to remember, like, this is distressing but not dangerous. This is distressing but not dangerous. This is not a lion leaping at me at the forest. This is somebody with a different opinion. It's not dangerous. It's distressing. It can, especially if I have strong opinions, it can be distressing. So that to make a difference between what's distressing and what's dangerous is already very, very helpful. Or a sense of humor is my best friend. Temper is my worst enemy. A sense of humor is my best friend. Temper is my worst enemy. So to be able to look at the same situation with a sense of humor is a great thing. It really is such better than that I found it. It's very simple. It's not very complicated, and that's basically the story. Now the companion Lecture to Relatives of Former Patients. So there were a couple of really interesting anecdotes there, like the the young woman came out of the mental hospital, and she went shopping with her sister, and they went into a little shop and they found this object. And one sister said it was a wall hanging, and one sister said it was an ashtray. And somehow something got really out of hand there, and the poor girl had to be returned to the mental hospital. I'm laughing and crying. I don't know. I'm identifying somehow. You could understand. And we have difference of opinions about really important things, like is Tzimtzum Kupashuto or Lo Kupashuto. These are really serious issues. But they say in the 1790s in Vilna, people would get into fistfights because it made a big difference. A Tzimtzum is Tzimtzum, the contraction of godly light into this vacuum Hashem created to create the world. Did he remove himself? That's Tzimtzum literally. He removes himself, and the Hashem is hashkacha from a distance, watching the world from a distance. Or the Hasidic approach that Hashem's essence is just as much here as it was before the Tzimtzum. And the light was not removed, it was only concealed. And our job is to reveal the light, but we can connect. Hashem's etzem is everywhere. So the people who felt that Tzimtzum was Pashuta says that felt that wasn't the honor of Hashem to say Hashem is everywhere. That means Hashem is in the dunghill, in the garbage can. They didn't like that idea. But they say now you can see that we're much closer to the Geula Shalema, because even in those camps of that group, they think Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is really everywhere. So you can see we're getting closer to the Geula Shalema. Yes. So this idea, so Emet fits in well with what we're doing, because there's the idea of Hachna'ah, saying that something happened and I began to work myself up. I began to work myself up is already taking the responsibility for my emotional state, and then being able to look at it, being able to separate and look at what am I going through emotionally, rather than identifying with it. It's really, I just can't tell you how much this has helped me, the idea of observing our thoughts and feelings. Because as I say, the Alter Rebbe stresses so much in Torah or on the Likutei Torah that thought, speech, and action are garments of the soul, and they can be changed. And this is, people don't, unfortunately, Western psychology is saying, you are your thoughts and taivas, your desires, and you owe it to yourself to fulfill them. And this has caused so much suffering, so much suffering. Someone sent me a joke that that nowadays it's much harder for parents. In the olden days, parents just had to explain the birds and the bees. And now parents have to explain the birds and the birds, and the bees and the bees, and the bees that used to be birds and the birds that used to be bees. Okay, so Western psychology encourages people to follow any thought that can arise in the mind. We're very lucky. We're very lucky that we know there's an alternative. It's such a huge, huge blessing to not be caught in that whirlpool of wrong information. We've spoken many times about the guy goes to his psychologist and says, I'm having trouble sleeping at night because I'm cheating on my wife and I'm having trouble sleeping at night. And the psychiatrist says, your problem is insomnia. I can help you with that. Here's a prescription for sleeping pills. So we're looking for more, we're looking, thank God, and to be able to learn the panemius of Torah is a wonderful thing. So I've shared with you some ideas from Emet. So we'll continue a little bit. So chapter 28 is really the second part of chapter 27. It's interesting because they both are speaking about thoughts that enter the mind. In 27, it's while we're going around our day. In 28, it's what of these thoughts come while we're davening and learning. But it's interesting because chapter 26 gets two really big deals. It gets objective suffering, financial issues, health issues, family issues, objective suffering. It's not just something in my mind. And also, spiritual failings, how I was a disappointment to Hashem, a disappointment to myself. And there we know, not now, push it away with two hands, Tuesday at 3. Self-scrutiny, reassessment has to be at a time that we choose. And reassessment is, Rabbi Effie uses the word reassessment a lot. And I've become very fond of that word. We often have to reassess a situation, reassess a relationship, reassessment, where am I holding? Okay, so the most time in Tanya, 2 chapters, 27 and 28, are devoted to the third cause of a bad mood, thoughts that arise in my mind. So the person's challenge coming from within. Yes, also, yes, someone mentioned how Viktor Frankl also got a lot of encouragement from the Rebbe. The Rebbe really sent someone to find him and encourage him after his beliefs about how much of our mental state we can work on from within. Yes. So a person's challenge is the thoughts that come within. This is our biggest challenge, dealing with thoughts that enter the mind, much bigger of a deal than our outer circumstances. It's much easier to come to terms once we understand that the outer circumstances are all from Hashem, what our soul needs, and not only good, but the best. And Hashem is good, which again, we have to scrutinize ourselves to know, how deeply do I believe Hashem is good? Because it really makes a difference in understanding that we can only believe the circumstances are good as deeply as we believe Hashem is good. I think it comes together. And it's saying a lot. It's saying that Hashem was with me in all the traumatic experiences of my life. I wasn't alone. Hashem was with me. He was suffering along with me. And somehow my soul needed these experiences. I was thinking about this idea of how can we tell when we've healed from the trauma, when it's all been transformed into light? How do we know we have to work on the ones we haven't healed when they still come up and I feel like I hate you, or there's some emotional response? It means that still, oh, look, how lucky I have more darkness to transform into light. But to know it's possible, even if we see it in the smallest thing and know and believe it's possible, because again, this is the name of Rabbi Yitzchak's book, Transforming Darkness into Light. He's empowering us, the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak, are empowering us to transform all of the darkness of our life into light. And we see people, we know people that have gone through very traumatic experiences, but they have transformed it, and they're so inspiring. Yes. Oh, I was thinking just then of my friend Shlomo Schwartz, Oliver Shalom, who, okay, he did it. Yay. And it's inspiring. It's inspiring when we see people do it. And we also have to do it to inspire other people. Okay. So the person's challenge from the bad comes from within. And we shouldn't feel frustrated that it keeps lo sasaru. It's one of the 6 constant mitzvahs. Like, we might not graduate into becoming a tzaddik. We might have to be a Beinoni for our whole lives. This seems like what the Alter Rebbe seems to be saying. Occasionally he says, you never know, a ruach from a tzaddik might come, or we can have moments, who knows, maybe our friends are right, in 1 or 2 seconds during the day. But most of the time, it's like, I have to know what I'm thinking. When people start meditating, like whatever age we were when we first heard the concept of meditation is a highly dangerous sport when we have a lot of traumatic experiences, because as soon as we sit down, those traumatic experiences will appear, and we need to know how to deal with them. We need to recognize that it's not actually happening now. Hashem is with me now. And if Hashem is with me now, I can understand Hashem was with me when the initial traumatic experience occurred. And that is a big deal. It's really a big deal, because we tend to feel we were totally isolated and alone. But Hashem was there. Hashem was experiencing it with me. Who knows, Hashem could be suffering from it more than I. In this last chat, well, it depends what country you're in, but Shalach, in Israel, we read Parsha Shalach on Shabbos, and Chutz La'aretz, you're reading it this week. But there's one section where Hashem is just really disgusted with the people, and he says, I'm going to knock them all off, except for you, Moshe. I'm going to make a whole new people just out of you. And Moshe starts being Hashem's psychotherapist, why it's not a good idea. Why it's not a good, he doesn't buy it at all. I'll make you, all these new people are going to come from you. Nope, Moshe's loyal to the Jewish people. And he's really telling Hashem, it's not a good idea to kill them all. The Egyptians will think, okay, us you were able to knock off, but you're not going to be able to. 7 kings in Canaan are too strong, and that's why you're killing them in the desert. You don't want people to think that about he gives Hashem a whole psychoanalytic approach why he shouldn't wipe out the Jewish people. And Hashem says, Salachti kidvarecha, I forgive them as you have asked, as you have said. And it's one of the lines that's repeated on Yom Kippur. You could understand why, that Hashem is saying, I've forgiven them. I've forgiven them. Salachti, I've forgiven them. We want to hear those words. So, on that note, so sometimes I don't know how that's going to work. I don't have too much experience being Hashem's therapist, but it's something we could consider doing this week. And yeah, right. So this class should be that Rav Yitzchak Feivish ben Brian Malka, that Rabbi Ginsburg should have a refuah shalema. He should be strong and feel good and be able to teach us more and more of the inner parts of Torah, so we can also transform darkness into light. So let's take a picture. Could everyone get well picture? Please put on your get well smiles. Oh, this is nice. Oh, look at these nice people. I'm having a good time now. Come on, a few more people. Don't be shy. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So have a wonderful week. Mwah. I love you. I'm so glad we're doing this together. It's so much more fun doing it together. See you next Sunday, Emer Hashem. Shalom, shalom. Kol Tov.